Hi, my name is Aaron, and this is Old TV Cinema. Now look, if you grew up in the 1990s, there's a good chance you spent at least a few evenings parked in front of the TV watching a pretentious Seattle psychiatrist argue with his father about a recliner. Frasier ran for 11 seasons, won more Emmy Awards than any comedy series in television history, and somehow made opera references and wine snobbery genuinely funny to middle America. But behind all those perfectly delivered punchlines in that iconic Crane apartment, there's a whole other show happening. One full of chaos, near disasters, and decisions that nearly sank the whole thing before it ever got going. Number 15. Frasier almost had a completely different cast. Here's something that'll make you do a double take. The cast of Frasier as we know and love it was not the original plan. Not even close. When NBC and producers Kelsey Grammer, David Angel, Peter Casey, and David Lee started putting the show together as a Cheers spin-off in 1993, almost every supporting role was up for grabs, and some of the choices being considered would have produced a completely unrecognizable show. John Mahoney, who became the beloved Martin Crane, was actually not the first choice for Frasier's father. Producers had considered going in a totally different direction with the character, including making Martin a more aggressive, combative figure rather than the warm, gruff, working-class dad Mahoney eventually brought to life. And David Hyde Pierce, Niles Crane, the perfectly wound, lovesick foil to Frasier's own pomposity. Pierce reportedly walked into audition, and producers were so struck by his resemblance to a younger Kelsey Grammer that they practically handed him the role on the spot. No lengthy search, no callback carousel, just a handshake and a tweed jacket. Jane Leeves and Perry Gilpin also weren't foregone conclusions for Daphne and Roz. Multiple actresses were considered for both roles. Imagine a version of this show where Roz wasn't Roz. Exactly? You can't, and neither could we. The cast we got was frankly a miracle of good fortune, dressed up as careful planning. Number 14. Kelsey Grammer was reportedly not in great shape at the pilot table read. Now, I'm gonna be a little diplomatic here, because this is a family channel. But Kelsey Grammer's personal struggles with substance abuse were hardly a secret during the run of Frasier. He's spoken about them publicly and honestly in interviews over the years. But what's less talked about is just how close to the edge things were right at the beginning. According to multiple accounts from people involved in the production, Grammer showed up to at least one of the very early table reads for the pilot in a state that was, let's say, less than ideal for a man about to anchor a network sitcom on his own for the first time. Now, here's the wild part. The show went on to win Grammer 4 consecutive Emmy Awards for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series. 4 consecutive. The man was barely holding it together in the rehearsal room, and somehow became the most decorated comedy actor of his generation. Hollywood is a strange but strange place. To his enormous credit, Grammer fought through his personal demons repeatedly during the show's run, and has been open about the journey. But it does give you a slightly different lens through which to watch those early episodes. That voice, that delivery, that perfectly calibrated condescension. Hard won. Every single bit of it. Number 13. The iconic theme song almost didn't exist. Okay, quick question. Can you hear the Frasier theme in your head right now? Of course you can. Tossed salads and scrambled eggs. That wonderfully bizarre, jazzy little closer that Grammer performed himself at the end of every single episode for 11 seasons. It became one of the most recognizable theme songs in television history, and it almost never happened. The original plan was for a more conventional instrumental theme, something polished and forgettable, the kind of thing you'd fast forward through in 2004 once TiVo entered your life. But composer Bruce Miller and lyricist Daryl Finnessy put together something genuinely strange, a lounge jazz number whose lyrics made almost no literal sense. Tossed salads and scrambled eggs are, as Frasier himself signs off every episode, a metaphor for the mixed-up callers he deals with on his radio show. Or at least that's the explanation the writers settled on. I've always thought it sounded more like a very confused breakfast order at a diner at 2 in the morning. But the song worked because it was odd, warm, and a little self-aware. just like the show itself. The fact that Grammer sang it himself, live every episode, makes it even more charming in retrospect. Number 12. Eddie the dog genuinely did not get along with Kelsey Grammer on set. One of the most beloved running gags in all of Frasier is Eddie, Martin's scruffy Jack Russell Terrier, staring at Frasier with an expression of absolute unblinking contempt. It was funny every single time, and it never got old. Here's the thing though, that was not entirely an act. Moose, the dog who played Eddie for the first 7 seasons, reportedly had a genuine preference for not being around Kelsey Grammer. Some accounts from the set suggest Moose simply found Grammer unsettling, in the way that dogs sometimes inexplicably decide a perfectly normal human being is their sworn enemy. And because trainers and directors were smart enough to recognize gold when they saw it, they leaned directly into it. That stare, that dead-eyed, deeply judgmental stare that made audiences howl every week, was partly just the dog doing what the dog was naturally inclined to do anyway. Moose was eventually succeeded by his own son, Enzo, who took over the role and carried on the tradition. And because Hollywood loves a dynasty apparently, even the dog on this show had a successful entertainment family. John Mahoney's Martin adored Eddie. Kelsey Grammer's Frasier was tormented by him. Art imitating life, or life imitating art. With a Jack Russell, honestly, it's hard to tell. Number 11. Niles never actually said the words, "I love you" to Daphne before they got together. Think about this one for a second. Niles Crane spent 6 full seasons of Frasier pining for Daphne Moon. 6 seasons of longing glances, near confessions, perfectly timed interruptions, and some of the most exquisitely constructed unrequited love comedy that television has ever produced. And in all that time, through hundreds of episodes of circling and sighing, and almost saying it, Niles never once looked Daphne in the eye and said those 3 words before they actually became a couple. It was a deliberate creative choice by the writers, and it was the right one. Because the moment you say it plainly, you deflate all the tension. The joke and the heartbreak lived entirely in what Niles could not bring himself to say directly. David Hyde Pierce reportedly found those scenes genuinely emotional to play, not just technically challenging. He's spoken about how he approached Niles' love for Daphne as something completely sincere rather than just a comedic device. And you can feel it. Every raised eyebrow, every barely swallowed sentence. It's real enough to ache a little. When they finally did get together, it felt earned in a way that almost nothing on television earns anymore. 6 seasons of almost. That is patience, both from the writers and from Niles. Number 10. The show was nearly canceled after its very first season. Here's a piece of television history that tends to get completely buried under 11 seasons of critical glory and Emmy Gold. Frasier very nearly did not make it past season 1. And I mean that seriously. This was not a close call in the dramatic retelling sense. This was a genuine conversation happening inside NBC about pulling the plug. The show premiered in September of 1993 to solid but not spectacular numbers, riding mostly on the goodwill left over from the Cheers farewell. But as the season wore on, ratings softened and network executives started asking uncomfortable questions about whether a cerebral, dialogue-heavy comedy about a wine-obsessed radio psychiatrist was really built for long-term survival on a major network. Fair question, honestly. It does sound ridiculous when you say it out loud like that. What saved it? The Emmy voters. The Television Academy rewarded Frasier with Outstanding Comedy Series after its very first season, and that validation gave NBC exactly the cover they needed to renew with confidence. Without that win, there is a very real chance Frasier ends at 22 episodes and becomes nothing more than a Cheers footnote. One of the greatest sitcoms ever made, gone before it ever found its stride. Close Call doesn't even begin to cover it. Number 9. Martin's hideous recliner was supposed to be a 1-episode visual joke. You know the chair? Of course you know the chair. Martin Crane's duct-taped, dog-haired, aggressively ugly recliner sitting dead center in Frasier's immaculately designed apartment like a personal insult delivered daily. It became one of the most iconic props in the entire history of the sitcom format. And according to the show's own creators, it was never supposed to last past the pilot. The original idea was simple. Martin moves in, brings the chair, Frasier loses his mind about it, end of joke, move on. But the chair kept generating laughs every single week, not just because it was ugly, but because it said something true about the show's entire premise. The collision between Frasier's carefully constructed self-image and the messy, stubborn, wonderfully undignified reality of his actual life. Martin refusing to give it up was character. Frasier being completely powerless to make him was also character. The set designer placed it deliberately off-center against the apartment's cool color palette, and every time the camera pulled back to reveal it just sitting there, it was a punchline that required 0 words. That chair did more dramatic heavy lifting than most actual co-stars on lesser shows, and it started as a throwaway gag that nobody expected to survive the first episode. Sometimes the accident really is the genius. Number 8. David Hyde Pierce reportedly came close to walking away from the show. David Hyde. Pierce is so perfectly cast as Niles Crane that imagining Frasier without him feels genuinely impossible. And yet, at a certain point during the production run, Pierce was seriously weighing whether to continue. The reasons were not widely discussed at the time, but Pierce has spoken in interviews since about navigating real personal difficulty during the show's run, specifically the pressure of maintaining a private life in an industry and an era that was not exactly known for its sensitivity or discretion. Pierce came out publicly as gay in 2008, years after Frasier wrapped. During the show's run, carrying that privacy while simultaneously playing a character whose entire arc revolved around hidden feelings, unspoken truths, and the quiet devastation of wanting something you cannot plainly say out loud was not a small thing. Pierce has been thoughtful and generous in discussing it since. But once you know it, the Niles performance recolors itself completely. That particular ache, that careful management of feelings that can never be too directly stated. David Hyde. Pierce was not entirely acting. The show is richer and more quietly human because of it. And that is worth saying plainly, even if Niles never quite could. Number 6. The apartment number changed mid-series and almost nobody caught it. This one is for the obsessives in the audience, and I know you're out there. Frasier's apartment in the Elliott Bay Towers is one of the most recognizable locations in 1990s television. But here is a continuity error so brazen it almost feels intentional. The apartment number changed between the early and later seasons of the show. In the earlier episodes, Frasier's apartment is identified as number 1911. By later seasons, references and visual details place it at number 2100 Dispinod. Production design errors happen on every show. But on a series as meticulously crafted as Frasier, where the writer's room was legendarily precise about internal logic and character consistency, this one is a little surprising. Unless, of course, Frasier simply moved within the same building and decided not to mention it to anyone, which is honestly very on brand for him. He would absolutely relocate 2 floors up without telling his family and then act confused when they pointed it out. I'm gonna choose to believe that's exactly what happened. Number 5. John Mahoney was only about 10 years older than Kelsey Grammer in real life. Here is one of those behind-the-scenes facts that genuinely stops you cold once you know it. John Mahoney, who played Martin Crane, Frasier's retired cop father, was born in 1940. Kelsey Grammer, who played his son, was born in 1955. That is a 15-year age gap between a man and his on-screen father. On television, fathers and sons routinely have age gaps of 25 to 30 years. Mahoney pulled off playing a generationally older, physically limited working-class father to Grammer's Frasier so completely and so warmly that the question of their real-life ages simply never arose for audiences. It speaks to Mahoney's remarkable talent that Martin Crane never felt like a performance. He felt like someone's actual dad, the kind of dad who watches the game too loud, eats the wrong food, and is quietly, stubbornly proud of his kids in ways he can't quite articulate. Mahoney passed away in 2018, and the tributes from his castmates made clear just how much of what felt real about Martin Crane came directly from the man himself. 15 years. You'd never know it for a single second. Number 4. Frasier broke a records that almost nobody talks about today. Everybody knows Frasier won the Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series a lot. But here is the specific number that tends to get glossed over in casual conversation. Frasier won the Outstanding Comedy Series Emmy 5 consecutive years, 1994 through 1998, 5 in a row. No other comedy series in the history of the award had done that before, and none has done it since. To put that in context, this was happening at the same time as Seinfeld, which is regularly argued to be the greatest sitcom ever made, was in the peak years of its run. Frasier was beating Seinfeld at the Emmys while Seinfeld was at its absolute best. That is not a knock on Seinfeld. That is a testament to just how extraordinary Frasier was operating at its peak. The show won 37 Emmy Awards total across its run. 37. And yet, somehow, in the modern conversation about the greatest sitcoms ever made, Frasier tends to get treated as a runner-up. 5 consecutive wins. Write that down somewhere. Number 3. Bebe Neuwirth was not exactly thrilled about returning to the Frasier universe. Bebe Neuwirth had played Lilith Sternin on Cheers since 1986, Frasier's ex-wife, Frederick's mother, a woman whose emotional temperature appeared to hover somewhere around absolute zero. She is one of the great deadpan comic creations in sitcom history, and I will die on that hill. Neuwirth reprised the role several times across Frasier's run and was brilliant every single time. But here's what most people don't know. By multiple accounts, Neuwirth had genuinely complicated feelings about coming back. She had moved on to a thriving Broadway career, winning Tony Awards while the rest of us were still rewinding VHS tapes. Stepping back into Lilith's particular brand of glacial wit required a recalibration she didn't always welcome. Not one moment of that ambivalence ever made it to screen, though. Lilith showed up and immediately owned every scene she walked into. That is professionalism. Also, Lilith is terrifying in the best possible way, and I will not hear otherwise. Number 2. The finale was originally conceived as something considerably darker. The Frasier finale, broadcast in May of 2004, is widely considered one of the better series endings in television history. Frasier leaves Seattle, chasing a new job, a new city, a new chapter. Bittersweet, earned, and just open enough to feel hopeful. It works. But here's the thing. The writers seriously considered ending it much darker. Versions were discussed where Frasier's journey concluded not with optimism, but with something genuinely melancholy. The idea that a man who spent 11 seasons desperately chasing connection and significance might simply end up alone was reportedly on the table. They pulled back, chose warmth over bleakness, probably the right call for a show that was always fundamentally about aspiration rather than defeat. But knowing a sadder ending was genuinely in play adds a different texture to that final scene. Frasier on a plane, heading somewhere new. It lands a little differently when you realize it almost didn't look like that at all. Number 1. Kelsey Grammer's personal life nearly derailed the entire show. Twice. We are saving this one for the top because it deserves the spotlight. Grammer's struggles with substance abuse were not background noise during Frasier's run. They were woven directly through it. In 1996, a serious car accident. 1997, rehab. Productions restructured around him. The entire machine bent itself to keep the show alive and its star upright. That it worked, that Frasier kept producing some of its sharpest work through all of it, is a testament to Grammer's talent, and to a cast and crew that quietly held everything together. Grammer has spoken about all of it openly, and without self-pity in the years since. But watch those mid-run seasons, knowing what was happening behind the camera. That composure Frasier Crane projects every single episode. That immaculate, slightly brittle dignity. Maybe it wasn't entirely a performance.